And one of the reasons why I think people don't like the idea of chastisement is because we've lost completely the notion of what sin is, or mortal sin is.
No, they'll never take us under, because we're bringing truth like thunder. Raining on your speakers like a ton of bricks. Hold the cross high.
Barry and Jesse shows rated R, righteous, respectful, and rejuvenating. We've got Dr. John Horvat here. We're talking about the disorder in our society, the dystopia, Satanism, everything that has to do with this this entire cocktail of evil, which is all interconnected. And so, Dr. Horvat, we're talking about the fact that there's been a rise in Satanism and the occult, and it's no longer hidden. That's what the word occult means, hidden. It's no longer hidden. Mm-hmm. It seems to be center stage in this culture war, and I just want to put in a cheap plug for my book. I wrote a book called A Catholic Vote for Trump. It's put out by Tan Books. And in here, I give you basically the reasons why you should talk with your family members and friends on why we need to reelect President Trump. But I will say this, and I did mention it in the book, when you have Satanists cursing you liturgically, they have an official, dedicated time of cursing you. You have witches cursing you in liturgical manner. You have Planned Parenthood coming against you and funding your enemies against you, and you also have the communists coming after you. I don't know. That seems to speak volumes about your character. That's the type of guy I want. In other words, if Planned Parenthood hates Jess Romero and the communists hate me and Satanists are cursing me and witches are cursing me, that probably says that I'm probably on the right side of the fence. And I just named the four enemies of President Trump. So going back to this macro question that you were talking about, Satanism is not something that's being done in some dark corner somewhere, in the forests of San Bernardino in some shack. It's now mainstream. They're open. They have, again, uniformity in social media. They have this liturgical cursing times throughout the day. They're trying to have black masses in universities and in government rented buildings. This is a huge problem right now. And I think that as Catholics, not enough Catholics, and even our clergy, I don't think they make enough about this. I think there should be more of a liturgical, institutional response from our church, from our bishops. What do you say?
Well, definitely, yes. It's the people have the tendency to think that Satanism is something is sort of a folkloric thing, that it just sort of spells and things that people do, and they don't have any real effect upon society and events, and that's absolutely not true. The devil can act and does act when he's called upon to act, and it can have, very dire effects upon people. When you have somebody, launching a spell against you, it can have effects on you. It can't. I mean, God will protect you if you are devout and you take your precautions, but it does have its effects, and we can't underrate them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. They certainly take it seriously. We should also take it seriously.
And the reason we know, Doctor, that it does have an effect is because, you'll even find exorcists will tell you. That's why they're always telling us as Catholics, live in a state of sanctifying grace, because sanctifying grace protects you from curses and hexes. If you're a Catholic that's living in mortal sin, you're not protected. And if somebody, a family member, a friend is cursing and hexing you and doing incantations, those curses will take hold because they're calling demons to vex, torment, annoy you, harass you. Your only protection, as St. Paul talks about in an entire chapter, Ephesians chapter 6, is to put on the armor of God. The armor of God is living in a state of sanctifying grace. Yeah.
Definitely.
John, let me ask you another question. Give me your take on the coronavirus. I think it's either God's direct will or his permissive will. I tend to lean more as his permissive will. How should Catholics discern this pandemic? Is it a wake-up call for everybody to get right with God, to return to God and return to a social order? Give us kind of your analysis of the coronavirus. And I say this because there are some prelates that have more of a modernist view. They're saying, no, this has nothing to do with God. This has nothing to do with God. This is, right. God out of it and stuff. And they just completely dismiss the biblical data that God has used diseases and plagues in time past to chastise his people, because the Bible says God chastises those who he loves. So where do you fall on this? Give us your take on the coronavirus.
Well, it's controversial. I know it's controversial, but I tend to fall. I do fall. I don't even tend to fall. I do say it is a chastisement. And, people say, well, that's a cruel way of looking at it. And I say, well, the person to ask if it's a chastisement is not a theologian. It's not a person that, doesn't want to hear that. It's to ask a repentant sinner. And I'm a repentant sinner. And I'll take credit for it. I deserve this. My sins deserve this chastisement. And I believe, if repentant sinners, you look at them throughout history, they are the first ones to say that God is chastising, even though they are repentant and they are in a state of grace. So I would say, at least from my point of view, for my part, I deserve this. I deserve all the consequences of this pandemic, because it is, we live in a world of sin. And one of the reasons why I think people don't like the idea of chastisement is because we've lost completely the notion of what sin is, or mortal sin is. It's just sort of a little thing, it's one abortion would be enough to cause a chastisement of what we're seeing in this pandemic. But we have millions of abortions, and those are millions of sins, and those are very serious and grave sins against God. So I would say that's my take on it. It definitely is.
You know what? You just said something that I remember years ago. St. John Paul II, he mentioned it. He said he talked a little bit about the theology of sin. And I remember he made a statement. He said that society has lost its sense of sin.
Absolutely.
And that's where we're at right now. It seems like if our moral compass, which is supposed to point towards the North Star, Jesus Christ, our moral compass is broken, and it's not pointing towards the North Star. We're more concerned now with me, myself, and I want to feel good. And that's the difference, between Satanism and Luciferianism and Catholic Christianity. Catholic Christianity is thy will be done. Satanism and Luciferianism is my will be done.
Right. And, so many saints, they'll say that. For them, I'm not sure. I think it was probably St. Ignatius who said, to prevent a single mortal sin, I would suffer my whole life, just to prevent a single one. But so many other saints have said similar things, that they would gladly suffer so that a sin would not be committed, a mortal sin might be sin, even venial sins. So, they definitely knew the gravity of sin. They knew what it meant. They knew what it meant to God. And, to say that this is a chastisement, we suffer that chastisement out of joy because we know we deserve it. We know this is helping our spiritual life. This is going to help our sanctification. Chastisement is not necessarily a bad thing. It's something that will help us in our path towards sanctification and ultimately toward our salvation, to go to heaven.
Dr. John, something just jumped out at me is when you said that, and it's beautiful. I want to share it. St. Paul says the same thing in Romans chapter 8, what you just said. Romans chapter 8, I'm looking for the passage where he says, I'll find it right here. Here it is. Romans 8:18. Here's what you just said. St. Paul says, I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us in heaven.
Yes.
St. Paul says, man, the sufferings we're going through right now, as St. Teresa of Avila, she said, for those who die and get to heaven, when they look at their life on planet Earth, it's going to be just like one night in a cheap hotel. If you lived a horrible life for 90 years, quadriplegic, with a feeding tube in your throat on a wheelchair, even if you live like that in a dark hospice, St. Teresa says, when you die and you're in heaven, for those who make it, she says, all the bad moments on planet Earth will just seem like one night in a cheap hotel. Let me ask you another question here. I want to ask you about this us versus them mentality in America, because this is huge. This is where we're at right now. And I think the thing that divides America, if there's one fundamental issue where we can see the us versus them, would be the issue of abortion. I think that's bifurcated the country, pro-life, pro-death. And so my question to you